They say some childhoods leave marks you can't quite scrub away, like crayon on a sun-baked wall. Mine? Mine was less about the vibrant colors and more about the dull, persistent ache of being less than. I'm Maya. My sister was Chloe. And our dad, well, let's just call him Robert for now, because the villain felt a bit too theatrical, even though sometimes it felt accurate. Growing up in our house was like watching a play where everyone knew their lines except me. Chloe was the star, the one who effortlessly commanded the spotlight. Robert was her dedicated audience, showering her with applause, whether she deserved it or not. And me? I was the stagehand, toiling in the shadows, making sure the show went on, but never getting a curtain call. It started small, the insidious little digs that slowly chipped away at my self-worth. Chloe could trip over her own feet in ballet class, and Robert would declare it artistic expression. I could ace every test in AP Calculus, and he'd shrug and say, "Well, that's what you're supposed to do." Breakfast was a perfect microcosm of our family dynamic. Chloe would wake up to a symphony of sizzling bacon, fluffy pancakes, and perfectly arranged fruit skewers. Robert would be in the kitchen, humming, meticulously crafting her personalized feast. Me? I was lucky if the cereal box wasn't empty. More often than not, I choked down dry flakes while Chloe regaled Robert with tales of her dazzling social life. School events? Forget about it. Chloe's school plays were mandatory viewing. He'd block out his entire calendar, invite the neighbors, and film the whole thing. My science fairs? He'd maybe swing by for 5 minutes, glance at my meticulously constructed volcano, and then rush off to Chloe's cheerleading practice. Christmas was the real kicker. The mountain of presents under the tree would always be disproportionately skewed towards Chloe. Designer clothes, the latest gadgets, anything her little heart desired. I'd get practical gifts. Socks! A calculator. School supplies. Once, I actually got a vacuum cleaner. I think I was 12. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that I was above it all, that intellectual pursuits were more valuable than popularity contests. But deep down, it stung. It burned like a paper cut laced with lemon juice. Then Mom got sick. Everything changed. Or maybe everything just became amplified. I was 16, Chloe was 14, when Mom, Sarah, got the diagnosis. Aggressive breast cancer, the kind that laughs in the face of hope. Those 2 years were a blur of hospital visits, chemo treatments, and the ever-present scent of antiseptic. My world shrank to the confines of our house, the sterile waiting rooms, and the constant, gnawing fear that clawed at my insides. While Mom withered, Robert doubled down on his adoration for Chloe. It was like he was trying to shield her from the harsh reality, to insulate her in a bubble of denial. He hired a private tutor to keep her grades afloat, even though she barely attended classes. He enrolled her in expensive therapy sessions to deal with the emotional trauma. He basically treated her like she was made of spun glass. Meanwhile, I became the de facto caregiver. I administered Mom's medication, cleaned the house, cooked meals, and somehow managed to maintain a semblance of normalcy in my academic life. I was running on fumes, fueled by caffeine and sheer, stubborn will. Robert? He was present, I guess, but emotionally absent. He'd sit by Mom's bedside, holding her hand, but his eyes were always glazed over, as if he were watching a movie instead of living a nightmare. He'd often just look at Chloe with a pained expression, but never me. Sometimes, late at night, when everyone else was asleep, I'd sneak into Mom's room and just sit with her. We'd talk about everything and nothing. She'd tell me stories about her childhood, her dreams, her regrets, and sometimes she'd just cry. Those were the moments I felt closest to her. The moments when the facade of forced cheerfulness crumbled, and she allowed herself to be vulnerable. One night, a few weeks before she died, she told me something that would forever alter the landscape of my life. She was weak, her voice barely a whisper. The morphine was doing its job, numbing the pain but also loosening her tongue. "Maya," she said, her eyes fluttering open. "There's something I need to tell you about Chloe." I leaned closer, my heart pounding. "Robert, he's a good man," she stammered, wincing with pain. "But I wasn't always faithful." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "What? What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. She took a shaky breath. "A long time ago, before you were born, Robert was away on a business trip. I made a mistake. A stupid, terrible mistake." She paused, her eyes filling with tears. "I had an affair. Just a short one. A co-worker." 9 months later, Chloe was born. My mind reeled. I couldn't process what she was saying. It was like a scene from a soap opera, not my own life. "Are you saying Robert isn't Chloe's father?" I whispered. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Maya. I should have told him years ago, but I was afraid of what he would do, afraid of losing him. But why are you telling me this now?" She squeezed my hand weakly. "Because you deserve to know the truth. You're strong, Maya. You can handle it. And I trust you to do what's right." She closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her. "Don't tell Robert," she mumbled, her voice fading. "Not yet. Please?" I nodded, tears blurring my vision. "I promise, Mom. I won't tell him." She drifted off to sleep, leaving me alone with the weight of her secret. I sat there for hours, staring at her pale, frail face. The truth swirled inside me, a toxic cocktail of shock, anger, and betrayal. Everything suddenly made sense. The blatant favoritism, the unspoken tension, the feeling that Chloe was somehow different. But I couldn't tell Robert, not while Mom was still alive. It would have destroyed him, and it would have made her last days even more unbearable. So I buried the secret deep inside me, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. Mom died 2 months before my graduation. The funeral was a blur of black clothes, tearful faces, and hollow platitudes. Robert was inconsolable. He wandered around like a ghost, his eyes vacant, his shoulders slumped. Chloe clung to him, sobbing uncontrollably. I felt numb. I'd been grieving for months, watching Mom slowly slip away. Her death, while devastating, was also a strange sort of relief. The suffering was finally over. Graduation day arrived, a bittersweet milestone overshadowed by grief. I had worked my ass off for 4 years, juggling classes, a part-time job, and caring for Mom. I had earned this moment, but Robert didn't come. He stayed home with Chloe. She was too emotional to attend the ceremony, he said. She couldn't bear to face the world without Mom. I understood. I really did. But it still stung. I walked across the stage, accepted my diploma, and delivered my valedictorian speech to a sea of faces. I scanned the crowd, hoping to catch a glimpse of Robert, but he wasn't there. I felt a pang of loneliness so profound it took my breath away. I had achieved this incredible feat, and the person who should have been the proudest was nowhere to be seen. Later that night, I went home to an empty house. Robert and Chloe were out, having a special dinner to commemorate Mom's life. I sat alone in my room, surrounded by the ghosts of my past, the trophies I had won, the certificates I had earned, the countless hours I had spent studying, all meaningless without someone to share them with. That night, I made a decision. I was done playing the role of the dutiful daughter. I was done sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of others. I was going to build my own life. A life where I was the star, not the stagehand. Mom had set up a college fund for me before she got sick. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough to cover a significant portion of my tuition. After the funeral, I asked Robert about it. He mumbled something about medical bills, about how Mom's insurance hadn't covered everything. I knew he was lying. Mom's insurance had been excellent, and even if there were outstanding bills, There was still plenty of money left in the fund, but I didn't argue. I knew it was pointless. I applied for every scholarship I could find, worked 2 part-time jobs, and took out a mountain of student loans. I was determined to get my education, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, Robert somehow found the money to send Chloe to an expensive summer dance program in New York City. 3 weeks later, Chloe dropped out, claiming she didn't feel comfortable in the competitive environment. That program cost more than my entire first year of tuition. I worked my ass off in college. Full course load, honor roll every semester, 2 part-time jobs. I lived off ramen noodles and coffee, sharing a cramped apartment with 3 other girls to save money. Chloe, on the other hand, lived at home, rent-free, indulging in a series of expensive hobbies that Robert happily funded. There was the pottery phase, which involved a $2,000 spottery wheel that now sat gathering dust in the garage. The photography phase, for which Robert bought her a professional camera and a suite of lenses. And let's not forget her brief attempt at becoming a professional food critic, which mostly consisted of Robert paying for fancy restaurant meals. I tried to ignore it, to focus on my own goals, but the injustice was a constant nagging presence in my life. I felt like I was running a marathon while wearing lead boots, while Chloe was cruising along in a luxury car. I graduated at the top of my class and landed an entry-level position at a prestigious consulting firm. The starting salary wasn't great, but it was a foot in the door, a chance to prove myself. I lived in a tiny studio apartment in a less than desirable neighborhood. I took the bus everywhere. I packed my own lunches. Every spare dollar went towards paying off my student loans and building an emergency fund. Chloe was on her 5th career change. This time, she decided she wanted to be a yoga instructor. Robert, of course, paid for her certification, her expensive yoga gear, and even rented a small studio for her. She used it for 3 months before deciding she wasn't fulfilled. At this point, the family dynamic didn't bother me as much anymore. I had built my own life. I had great friends, a promising career, my own space. I stayed out of family matters, showing up for major holidays with a generic gift card and leaving before any drama could start. It worked for a while, or at least I thought it did. Over the last few years, I had really hit my stride professionally. I worked my way up to senior consultant. I paid off my student loans early, and I even started building a decent investment portfolio. For the first time in my life, I felt financially stable. I'm not flashy about my success. I drive a used Honda. I live in a modest but nice apartment. My biggest splurge is my weekly therapy sessions, which have honestly been worth every penny. But I guess news spreads, especially in the age of social media. Robert and Chloe saw my LinkedIn profile. They saw pictures of my apartment on Facebook. They saw the articles I published in industry journals. The confrontation that happened last Saturday had been brewing for a while. A week before, I started getting weird messages from Chloe, asking for investment advice and if I could help her start a business. I gave the vaguest answers possible because I knew where that road led. Then Robert started calling more often, making odd comments about how successful children support their parents and sending me articles about family wealth management. So when they showed up at my door last Saturday morning, I wasn't entirely surprised, just disappointed. Opening the door to find Robert and Chloe standing there felt like a scene from a bad movie. Robert didn't even wait for an invitation before walking into my apartment. The first thing he did was look around and comment on how luxurious my place was. It's not. It's just a 2-bedroom apartment with IKEA furniture and a decent view. Chloe flopped onto my couch like she owned the place, scrolling through Instagram on her phone. Robert pulled out a spreadsheet, a meticulously crafted, color-coded spreadsheet. He called it my family obligations. He had calculated that I owed him approximately $150,000 for raising me. Apparently, he had kept receipts for everything from my childhood medical bills to school supplies to the cost of every single meal he'd ever cooked for me. On top of that, he wanted me to invest in Chloe's new business idea, a crystal healing spa that would only need about $75. to get started. That's when I snapped. Something inside me just broke. Years of pent-up resentment, of unspoken grievances, of feeling like I was never enough, all came crashing down. I started with the college fund. I asked him point blank what had really happened to Mom's savings. He mumbled something about medical bills, but I reminded him that Mom's insurance had covered most of them. I reminded him that there was still plenty of money left. He shifted uncomfortably. Well, there were other expenses, he stammered. Like what? I challenged. Like Chloe's dance classes? Like her pottery wheel? Like her photography equipment? He didn't answer. I listed every dance class, every expensive hobby, every time he had chosen Chloe over me. I even pulled up my old student loan statements on my phone to show him exactly how much debt I had taken on while he funded Chloe's self-discovery phases. He tried to interrupt, to deflect, but I wouldn't let him. I was on a roll, fueled by years of suppressed anger. Do you even know how much I struggled? I asked, my voice rising. Do you have any idea how many nights I went to bed hungry? How many hours I spent studying while working 2 jobs? How much I sacrificed to get where I am today? He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and resentment. You always had to be so dramatic, Maya, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. You always had to make everything about you. That was it. That was the final straw. I took a deep breath, trying to control my rage. I have something I've been holding on to for years, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Something Mom told me during one of our last conversations. Robert's face paled. He knew what was coming. She confessed that she wasn't sure if Chloe was actually your biological daughter, I said, watching his reaction. The room fell silent. Robert's face turned a strange shade of purple I had never seen before. His mouth gaped open like a fish out of water. Chloe just sat there, mouth agape, phone forgotten in her lap. Then she started crying. Not her usual dramatic sobs, but silent tears of shock and disbelief. Robert started yelling, calling me a liar, saying I was making things up just to hurt them. How dare you say that about your mother, he roared, his face contorted with rage. She would never do something like that, wouldn't she? I challenged. She told me herself. She had an affair while you were away on a business trip. 9 months later, Chloe was born. That's a lie, he screamed. A filthy, disgusting lie. Is it? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. I pulled out my phone and showed them the email I had saved from last year. The DNA test results I had obtained for health reasons. The results that confirmed that Chloe and I were only half-sisters. I had never planned to reveal this. It was Mom's secret to take to the grave, and I had respected that for years. But something about Robert's entitlement, the spreadsheet, the demands, just made me snap. I had this done a year ago. I already knew, I said softly. I told them both to leave. Robert kept yelling, but Chloe stayed silent and started pushing him toward the door. He stumbled out, ranting and raving, promising to sue me, to disown me, to make my life a living hell. Chloe lingered for a moment, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and confusion. Why did you do this, Maya? She whispered. Because I'm done, I said, my voice trembling. I'm done being the doormat. I'm done being invisible. I'm done pretending that everything is okay when it's not. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I don't know what to say, she whispered. I need time to think. Then she turned and walked away, leaving me alone in my apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of my family. Since then, things have been intense. My phone hasn't stopped ringing with messages and calls from both of them, plus relatives who have heard different versions of what happened. Robert has been telling everyone that I'm lying to get out of my family obligations. He claims I fabricated the whole story to avoid handing over the money they deserve. Chloe has completely disappeared from social media, something unheard of for her. She's gone radio silent, ignoring my calls and texts. I've blocked most of their numbers and accounts now. I can't take the constant barrage of accusations and insults. I'm sitting here in my apartment, going back and forth between feeling guilty for revealing Mom's secret and relieved that everything is finally out in the open. Did I go too far? Should I have just thrown them out without saying anything? Should I have kept Mom's secret, even if it meant sacrificing my own happiness? I've been carrying this secret for so long. Maybe it wasn't my place to reveal it. Maybe I should have just let it die with her. But seeing them walk into my home like they were entitled to my money, after years of favoritism and emotional neglect, I just couldn't hold it in anymore. I needed them to know the truth. I needed them to understand the depth of their betrayal. But now I'm left with the fallout. A fractured family, a lifetime of resentment, and the gnawing feeling that I may have made things even worse. Am I the one in the wrong? The story will continue in the following sections, building upon this foundation and expanding the narrative with additional details, character development, and rising action. I'll continue the story in subsequent sections, building upon the foundation laid out here and further exploring Maya's emotional journey, the reactions of her family, and the consequences of her actions. Well, before I get to the update I have for you, which I can already tell you is going to be a good one, I need to address the question of why I never told Robert about Mom's infidelity. I understand that it's not right to hide something so important from a father, but here's the thing. I haven't considered him my father in a long time. He never treated me even remotely like a daughter, despite the fact that I was biologically his. So I didn't feel like I owed him anything. I wasn't obligated to tell him anything. If he had been even halfway decent to me, if he hadn't spent my college fund on his favorite daughter, if he hadn't pushed me aside and left me to carry the full burden of Mom's illness alone, I would have told him. But no, even now, I still think the truth was too good for him. I would have preferred for him to never find out, to live his whole life in blissful ignorance, only to die and arrive in hell, where Satan himself would say, "You know what? You spent your whole life supporting a daughter that wasn't even yours." A sort of eternal punishment. But now, let's get to why I'm writing this update. Chloe is still completely silent, which doesn't surprise me. She's never been the type of person to face things head-on, especially when it comes to family drama. Avoidance has always been her strategy. That being said, I recently heard from one of our cousins, and surprise, surprise, Chloe hasn't been as quiet as she seems. Apparently, she reached out to them to vent about how unfair all of this is, and how I ruined her life. She probably wanted this truth to never come out, which is why, in her eyes, I'm the villain in this story. I'd understand if she blamed Mom. She was the one who was unfaithful to our father. But I was just the messenger. Yeah, an angry messenger who was already pissed off at not getting tipped. But I get it. I really get what's going on. For someone who's had all of Robert's attention, love, and support all these years, it probably feels like she's suddenly afraid of losing her status as the golden child. We don't know if her biological father will even be willing to treat her the way she thinks she deserves. And then there's Robert. The only way he can handle all of this is through denial. According to him, I'm a master manipulator who made all this up just to get out of financially supporting the family. That I would stoop this low just to avoid handing over the money they deserve. I can also understand why he's doing it. If he admits this is true, he has to face the fact that Mom, the woman he loved and built a life with, betrayed him. Though honestly, I don't know if he loved her that much, considering how little time he spent by her side when she was sick. Still, he has to accept that his family wasn't the perfect picture he always thought it was. And that's a lot to process. For a moment, I almost feel sorry for him. Imagine discovering that the person you loved most in the world, who was no longer here to defend themselves or explain their actions, kept such a massive secret. That kind of betrayal would be enough to break anyone. I understand why he's angry and hurt. But then, he takes all that pain and directs it straight at me, and that's exactly how he's always treated me, like a stranger. That's why I never thought telling him the truth would be the right thing to do. And look, I've read some of the comments on my original post, so I want to say this again. I'm not justifying what Mom did. Cheating is wrong, plain and simple, and I'm not here to defend her actions. I've already said that if anyone should be blamed for this, it's her. But what was I supposed to do when she told me the truth on her deathbed? Was I supposed to destroy the family while she was literally dying? Can you imagine the consequences of that? It would have been absolute chaos. And honestly, I don't think anyone would have thanked me for it either. They wouldn't have been grateful. They would have blamed me and treated me even worse than they already did, all while I was grieving my mother's death. I'm tired of being the scapegoat for everyone's feelings. I didn't create this situation. I wasn't the one who cheated. I wasn't the one who lied. I didn't ask to carry this secret for years. All I did was finally tell the truth. And somehow, I'm the one who ruined everything. At the end of the day, I know I did nothing wrong. If I had been truly cruel, I would have hired a skywriting plane to broadcast the secret to the entire city. They can twist the story however they need to, in order to feel better about themselves, but all they're doing is embarrassing themselves further. Anyway, Robert isn't done yet. His reaction has been an absolute disaster. In the last 2 days, he's gone through every possible emotion. First, denial. He flooded me with drunk messages, accusing me of destroying the family with lies. Then came anger. He started calling me from unknown numbers just to scream at me. When I blocked those numbers, he switched to emails, just as aggressive. Then we moved to bargaining. He literally told me he'd forgive me if I admitted I made everything up. I didn't respond to any of it, which sent him right back into rage mode. He started calling distant relatives, telling them I was having some kind of mental breakdown and that they shouldn't believe anything I said. And now, mostly silence. But, of course, there's always something. Last night, Robert showed up at my Aunt Janet's house at midnight, completely wasted, demanding to see old family photos. According to Janet, he spent hours comparing baby pictures of Chloe to his own baby pictures, muttering things like how he should have known because Chloe doesn't have his nose or Mom's red hair. It's like, even in his denial, some part of him knows the truth. Janet said it was heartbreaking to watch, but honestly, I don't know how to feel. Meanwhile, the family is a complete mess. My cousins are mostly staying out of it, which I respect. They've taken the "this isn't our problem" approach, and honestly, good for them. However, Robert's siblings are on the warpath. They are completely on his side, calling me every name in the book and accusing me of destroying the family. On the other hand, Mom's side of the family has been surprisingly supportive. Some of them admitted that they had always suspected something didn't quite add up, but they never said anything because they didn't want to cause drama. And as if all of that weren't enough, I've also had to deal with drama at work. My boss called me yesterday to ask if everything was okay because apparently my personal situation had become a topic of office gossip. It turns out that Robert had been calling my workplace, trying to get information about my salary and benefits. HR shut him down immediately. Thank God, but it was still pretty bad. I don't even want to think about what my coworkers must be thinking of me now. I've taken a few days off work to try to get my life back together, but it's hard to focus on anything when my phone keeps lighting up with messages from family members. I've muted most of them, but the guilt is still there. I hate that things have come to this, but I don't know what else I could have done. As a precaution, I ordered one of those video doorbells in case Robert decides to show up unannounced. I hate that it's come to this, but I need to feel safe in my own home. So yeah, that's where things stand right now. I'm exhausted, emotionally drained, and still trying to make sense of everything. But I'm holding on to that small feeling of freedom. Hopefully it lasts. Things have been strangely quiet since my last update, and I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not. You know what they say, the quietest hour comes before the storm. Everything feels very still, like everyone is frozen, unsure of what to do next. I've blocked both Robert and Chloe, at least temporarily, because the constant flood of messages and calls was wrecking my mental health. For the first time in a long time, my phone is silent. While it's a relief, it's also unsettling. It feels like a horror movie where everything is quiet, but, something bad is about to happen. I decided to tell my boss about the situation, just in case Robert or Chloe tries to cause problems at work again. Thankfully, he reassured me that HR would handle any issues and that my personal life wouldn't affect my position at the company. Still, it's humiliating to have to explain this mess. I've worked so hard to build a professional reputation, and now I wonder if some of my colleagues just see me as the girl with family problems. I've made a conscious decision not to engage in this drama unless it directly affects me. As tempting as it is to keep tabs on what everyone is saying or doing, I know it's not healthy. They're both adults, and at some point, they need to take responsibility for how they're handling this. Blaming me isn't going to change the facts. The rest of the family has also been unusually quiet. It's like everyone is waiting for someone else to make the next move. I heard from Aunt Janet, who said Robert has been staying with her on and off. He's been asking questions about Mom's past. Janet thinks he's trying to convince himself that this isn't true while simultaneously searching for proof that it is. It's a weird kind of limbo, and I don't envy him one bit. I also got a message from one of Mom's friends. She apologized for not reaching out sooner and said she feels guilty for not speaking up years ago. She told me more about the man Mom had the affair with, Chloe's biological father. He still lives in our old town, living a quiet life as a university professor. Apparently, he had no idea about Chloe's existence, and he probably still doesn't. For now, I'm just focusing on getting through each day. Work has been a welcome distraction, and I've been leaning on my friends more than ever. We go out for drinks, watch movies, and just try to forget about the chaos. It's not a perfect solution, but it helps. Sorry for disappearing for a while. After everything that happened, I decided I needed a break from the chaos, and writing here was part of that. I needed to step away from all of it for a bit. Now I feel better, like I'm in a better place mentally, so I can sit down and write an update for you all. About a week ago, Chloe showed up at my apartment completely out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting her at all. She wasn't in a good place. I could tell that much when I opened the door. She just stood there for a moment, like she wasn't even sure if she had come to the right place. When I let her in, she hesitated, like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. I didn't have the energy to argue or push her out, so I just gestured for her to sit down. For a few minutes, neither of us said anything. It was awkward, but I wasn't going to be the one to break the silence. Finally, she started talking, and let me tell you, I was not prepared for what she had to say. After cutting all communication with me, Chloe had apparently thrown herself headfirst into uncovering the truth. She reached out to some of Mom's old friends, people I didn't even know she was in contact with, and started asking questions. Through them, she managed to track down her biological father. She told me about the moment she contacted him and how he reacted. The man had absolutely no idea she even existed. Imagine living your life and suddenly discovering that you have a grown daughter. She said he was completely shocked at first, which makes sense. I can't even imagine what that must have been like for both of them. Apparently, when they finally met in person, they ended up talking for hours. Chloe admitted to me that she had been in denial for a long time, convincing herself that all of this couldn't be true, even when the signs were right in front of her. Meeting her biological father, however, changed everything. She said it made her realize that ignoring the truth wasn't helping anyone, least of all herself. After that, she decided to talk to Robert about everything. According to her, it was one of the hardest conversations she's ever had in her life. She said Robert didn't yell or accuse her of anything, but he completely broke down. He didn't say much, but she could see how devastated he was. On the other hand, her biological father seems eager to build a relationship with her, now that the initial shock has passed. Chloe seemed cautiously optimistic about it. She said it feels strange trying to connect with someone who is technically a stranger but also a part of her. I told her it's okay to take her time and not rush things. This is uncharted territory for both of them, and there's no right way to handle it. A few days after Chloe's visit, my dad reached out from a new number. He told me he knew that Chloe had met her biological father, and while he claimed to be happy for her, his voice didn't match his words. What really caught me off guard was when he said he had decided to move to Florida to his parents' old house. He said he needed a fresh start. I didn't know what to say, so I kept it simple. All right, take care. Before the call ended, he asked if I'd be willing to take a paternity test. And I said yes. Deep down, I want to know if he's really my father or not, because if there's a chance I have another father out there, he can't be worse than the one I have now. Life has been quieter since then. I've thrown myself into work and started focusing on things that bring me joy. My kickboxing class has been a lifesaver. There's something so cathartic about punching a heavy bag after everything I've been through. I've also started journaling, something my therapist suggested. I still have to tell you all what the paternity test results say, which we haven't done yet, but hopefully this will be the last update to my story. I want to give you what I hope will be my final update on my family, my sister, my father, and all of this. I have the results I promised, and they came back positive. I am biologically Robert's daughter. It's absurd to think about, because my father has treated someone else's child far better than his own for her entire life. Still, this hasn't changed our bond at all. We are still strangers. A part of me feels sad, because I thought maybe there could be another father out there, one who wasn't a complete jerk like Robert. But no! My luck doesn't go that far. So I remain tied to this one, at least symbolically, though now that he's moved, he's much farther away from me. I suppose I could be the bad one in this situation, in a way, because my dad asked me to keep him unblocked. I unblocked him so we could coordinate the paternity test, but I had planned to block him again once it was over. He says he wants to make amends and be a better father to me. That all sounds nice, and I'd be a terrible daughter if I didn't accept this so-called apology. But there's just one small problem. I don't believe him. I don't genuinely believe he wants to repair our relationship. I don't even know why he's hated me for so long. Maybe hate isn't the right word for what drove him to act the way he did, but I can't think of another reason for how he's treated me my entire life. The only reason he's doing this now is that he's been left completely alone. He's pushed Chloe away because it's too painful for him to accept that he's no longer her only father, even though Chloe has been open to keeping